I've always been a sucker for Christmas decorations, especially vintage ones. There's something magical about how they seem to hold onto memories of past holidays. So when I stumbled across an old box of ornaments at a local thrift store last December, I couldn't resist. The box was dusty, its once bright red paint faded and peeling. Inside were fragile glass ornaments, hand-painted with delicate patterns. Among them, one stood out, a large crimson globe with gold swirls and an odd inscription carved faintly into its surface. The letters were almost unreadable, but they had a strange allure, like they were calling to me. The elderly cashier noticed me admiring it. "That one's been here for years," she said, her voice hushed. "People say it's cursed." I laughed it off. Cursed or not, it was beautiful, and for $5, it was mine. That evening, I decorated my tree with the newfound ornaments, placing the crimson globe in the center. It caught the glow of the lights perfectly, casting faint, dancing patterns on the walls. As I sat back to admire my handiwork, I noticed something odd. The room felt heavier, like the air had thickened. The lights flickered, but I brushed it off as old wiring. The first real scare came later that night. I woke up around 3 a.m. to the sound of something tapping. At first, I thought it was branches brushing against the window, but when I turned on the light, I saw the source. The crimson ornament was swinging gently, tapping against the other decorations. I frowned, confused. There were no drafts in the room, no reason for it to move. I reached out to still it, but the moment my fingers touched its surface, a sharp pain shot through my hand. I yanked it back to find a thin, deep cut on my palm. Though the glass wasn't broken, as I wrapped my hand in a towel, I swore I heard a faint whisper, soft, unintelligible, and coming from the tree. Shaking off the unease, I went back to bed, determined to forget about it. The next morning, things only got stranger. Every light on the tree was off except the ones near the crimson globe, which pulsed faintly, as if alive. The air around the tree was cold, far colder than the rest of the house. I decided to inspect the ornament again, hoping to find a logical explanation. As I held it up, the faint inscription caught the light, and for the first time, I could make out the words, "To hold is to bind." The room seemed to darken around me, and a low hum filled the air. Suddenly, the ornament slipped from my grasp and hit the floor, but instead of shattering, it let out a sharp, high-pitched sound like a scream. The lights on the tree exploded. Panicked, I threw the ornament back into its box and shoved it into the closet. I wanted to get rid of it, but couldn't bring myself to throw it out. It felt like it wouldn't let me. That night, the whispers returned. Louder this time, they filled my room, overlapping, growing more frantic. When I turned on the light, I saw them. Shadows stretching across the walls, their shapes wrong, twisted. They all pointed toward the closet. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, I decided enough was enough. I packed up the ornament and drove to the thrift store, intending to return it. But when I arrived, the shop was closed, the windows dark, and a for lease sign hung on the door. Frustrated, I left it on the doorstep and drove away. But as I pulled into my driveway, my heart sank. The box was sitting on my porch. Terrified, I called a friend, Mike, to come over. I needed someone else to see it, to tell me I wasn't losing my mind. Mike arrived that evening, and I showed him the ornament. He laughed, calling it a creepy Christmas gimmick. But as he held it, his expression changed. "Lauren, do you hear that?" he asked, his voice trembling. Before I could answer, the room plunged into darkness. The whispers returned, deafening now, and the shadows moved. This time, emerging from the walls, reaching out with claw-like hands. Mike screamed, dropping the ornament. But it didn't hit the floor. Instead, it floated in midair, glowing fiercely as the shadows swirled around it. I grabbed Mike and ran. We didn't stop until we were outside, gasping for air from the yard. We watched as the house grew darker, the glow of the ornament visible through the windows. We never went back. The next day, I called the police, but when they arrived, the house was empty. No ornament, no shadows, just the faint smell of smoke and a cold that lingered in the air. I since moved far away, but every Christmas I can't help but glance at my tree, half expecting to see the cursed crimson globe. If you ever come across an ornament with strange words carved into it, leave it where it is. Some memories should remain buried. I've always loved Christmas, but last year's celebration changed me forever. My name is Lauren, and I live in a quiet neighborhood where everyone knows each other. Every December, a group of carolers roams the streets, spreading cheer with their warm voices. This year was no different, or so I thought. It started on Christmas Eve. Snow dusted the sidewalks as I sat by the fireplace, sipping hot cocoa and scrolling through my phone. Around 8 p.m., the faint melody of Silent Night drifted through the air. I peeked out the window to see the carolers standing under the street lamp in front of my house. Their outfits were festive, red and green with gold accents, and they held lanterns that flickered softly. Normally, I'd open the door and enjoy the music, but something felt off. Their voices, though harmonized, carried a strange, almost mechanical quality, and their faces, they were too still, their smiles fixed as if painted on. I tried to shake off the unease, reasoning it was just my overactive imagination. As the song ended, they tilted their heads in unison, staring directly at my window. My heart skipped a beat. "Don't be rude, Lauren," I muttered to myself, grabbing a tray of cookies. I opened the door. "Merry Christmas," I said, forcing a smile. The tallest caroler, a man with deep-set eyes and a crooked bow tie, stepped forward. "Merry Christmas," he replied, his voice hollow and devoid of warmth. He reached into his pocket and handed me a small wrapped box. "A gift for you." "Oh, thank you," I said, taking the box. But when I looked up again, the carolers were already halfway down the street, their song echoing eerily into the night. Back inside, I examined the box. It was wrapped in crimson paper, tied with a black ribbon, a strange choice for Christmas. Inside was a small, silver bell. It looked old, tarnished, and heavy for its size. As I held it, I felt an odd vibration, almost as if the bell was humming. A sudden wave of dizziness washed over me, and I quickly set it down. The night passed uneventfully until just past midnight, when I was jolted awake by a piercing noise. It was the bell. It sat on my dresser, vibrating violently, emitting a high-pitched chime that seemed to grow louder the longer I stared at it. My instincts screamed to throw it out, but as I reached for it, the noise stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was worse. My room felt colder, and the shadows seemed to stretch and twist unnaturally. I glanced at the window and froze. The carolers were back. They stood motionless in my front yard, staring up at my bedroom window. The lanterns they'd carried earlier were gone, replaced by long, jagged sticks that glinted like blades in the moonlight. Panic set in. I grabbed my phone to call the police, but there was no signal. The lights flickered, and the house groaned, as if something heavy was pressing against it. "Lauren," a voice whispered from the hallway. I spun around, clutching my phone like a weapon. The door creaked open slowly, revealing nothing but darkness. "Lauren," the voice repeated, this time from the stairs. It was soft, sane, song, and horribly familiar. It was my mother's voice. But that was impossible. My mother had passed away 2 years ago. Trembling, I stepped into the hallway. "Mom," I called, my voice barely audible. The voice laughed, a distorted, mocking sound that made my skin crawl. Suddenly, the front door slammed open, and the caroler's song filled the house. It was louder now, discordant, each note grating against my ears like nails on a chalkboard. I bolted back into my room and locked the door. The bell sat on the dresser, now glowing faintly, desperate. I grabbed it and threw it out the window. The moment it hit the ground, the singing stopped. I peeked outside to see the carolers gathered around the bell. They knelt in unison, their bodies jerking unnaturally, like puppets on strings. Then one by one, they looked up at me. Their eyes were black voids, and their smiles stretched impossibly wide. The tallest caroler picked up the bell and rang it once. A sharp, deafening sound filled the air, and I collapsed to the floor, clutching my ears. When I came to, it was morning. The house was quiet, and the bell was gone. I rushed outside, but there were no footprints in the snow, no sign anyone had been there. I since moved far away, but I can't escape the memory. Every so often, I hear that haunting melody in the distance, and I know they're still out there. This Christmas, if the carolers come to your door, don't answer. And if they give you a gift, never, ever accept it. Christmas Eve always carried a certain magic in our family. This year, however, the air felt heavier, colder, as though something was watching us. Grandma Rose's insistence on the new tradition added to the unease. Every gift exchanged had to be an antique. Antiques have stories, Grandma Rose said, her voice quivering with age, but firm with conviction. They carry memories. I'd barely managed to find a tarnished brass candlestick at a thrift store, hoping it would pass the test, when I saw the gift meant for me, a small, ornate music box wrapped in faded green paper. I knew it was something special and something strange. The music box was old, its wood darkened with age, and a delicate winter scene was painted on its lid. A tiny brass key stuck out from the side. "Go on, Emily. Wind it up," Grandma Rose urged, her wrinkled hands clasped together eagerly. I turned the key hesitantly. The mechanism inside clicked and whirred, releasing a haunting melody that prickled my skin. It wasn't a Christmas carol, but something unfamiliar, a tune both sorrowful and hypnotic. That night, I placed the music box on my nightstand, unable to shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Sleep came in fits, plagued by dreams of shadowy figures circling my bed. Their whispers blended with the melody, a sinister lullaby I couldn't escape. The next morning, I woke to find the music box open, its key turning slowly on its own. The song played softly, as if coaxing me closer. My hands trembled as I shut the lid and shoved it into a drawer, determined to forget it. But things only grew worse. Throughout the day, I caught glimpses of movement in the corners of my vision, shadows that disappeared the moment I turned my head. My family seemed oblivious, laughing and chatting as they prepared Christmas dinner. Even Grandma Rose acted as if nothing was wrong, though I caught her staring at me with an intensity that made my stomach churn. That evening, I confronted her. "What's with the music box?" I demanded, my voice sharper than I intended. "Where did you even get it?" Her eyes darkened. "I told you, antiques carry memories. That box, it belonged to a family who lost everything one winter. Their grief is in the song. Their sorrow lingers." "Why would you give me something like that?" I asked, my voice shaking. Grandma Rose didn't answer. Instead, she handed me a folded note, yellowed with age. It read, "The box must never be opened after midnight." Panic gripped me. Midnight was less than an hour away. "Burn it," Grandma whispered, her voice cracking. "Before it's too late." I sprinted upstairs, fumbling to pull the music box from the drawer. It felt heavier, colder, as though it resisted my touch. The melody played faintly even with the lid shut, growing louder with every step I took toward the fireplace. By the time I reached the living room, the entire family had gathered, their laughter replaced by uneasy silence. "What are you doing?" my mom asked, her face pale as she eyed the music box. "Something's wrong with it," I said, my voice trembling. "We need to destroy it." Grandma Rose nodded solemnly, but before I could toss it into the fire, the lid burst open. The haunting melody erupted, filling the room with an almost tangible presence. Shadows spilled from the box like ink, coalescing into tall, dark figures with hollow eyes. The room plunged into chaos. My dad tried to grab me, but his hand passed through one of the shadows as if it were smoke. My little brother screamed, and my mom clutched him tightly, her face frowning in terror. The figures circled us, their whispers louder than the music. "Grief, loss forever," they chanted, their voices echoing like wind through a barren forest. "Burn it," Grandma shouted, her frail body trembling as she pointed at the fireplace. Summoning every ounce of courage, I hurled the music box into the flames. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a deafening screech, the box exploded, sending a shockwave of cold air through the room. The shadows dissolved, their whispers fading into silence. We stood there, stunned, the fire crackling softly, as if nothing had happened. The music box was gone, reduced to ashes, but its melody lingered in my mind. Grandma Rose placed a hand on my shoulder, her eyes filled with both sorrow and relief. "The memories have passed," she said quietly, "but they'll always leave a mark." That Christmas Eve was the last time our family exchanged gifts. The following year, Grandma Rose passed away in her sleep, a faint smile on her lips. I still hear the melody sometimes, faint and distant, a reminder of the darkness we barely escaped.